Hello, everyone. We're back again for the Monday Garrison. Today, we'll be discussing about diaspora and the impacts on the economy and the startup ecosystem, and also what are the practical obstacles that we have to overcome. We have a very interesting speaker today, which I will introduce later on. So, today's session starts with this massive number. We have 7.3 million Korean diasporas living worldwide, and many people don't really recognize how big our diaspora population is. And considering our recent birth rate declines or millionaire exodus happening in South Korea, I think these numbers will become even more valuable to Korean ecosystem and very meaningful number that we can keep in mind. When I was in Africa, what I learned is that many of successful African startups were also ran by diaspora populations, and also often founded or funded by diaspora angel investors, diaspora VCs, and I was very envious about that kind of structure within the ecosystem. And in that sense, I kind of always wanted to do this contents surrounding the diaspora ecosystem related to Korea, and here we go. First of all, we have to see globally, and then while I was searching through about this topic, I found out about this report written by Migration Policy Institute, MPI, policy brief. Although it's a bit outdated since it's 2013's paper, what we know about diaspora and the economic development. If I make a small brief about it, 3 pillars of economy has been influenced by the diaspora and immigration, according to the paper. Number 1 is trade. Number 2 is investment. And number 3 is skills and knowledge transfer. It may sound quite obvious, but if you look inside, it's pretty much interesting because this is one of the case that has been found from Canada during 1980 to 1992. Out of 136 trade partner countries, they found a 10% increase in immigration from a particular country that gets to be ending up with a 1% increase in export from the exact country of 10% increase, and 3% increase in import from the country that has the increase in the immigration populations. Also, El Salvador, which also represented a rare case, is that diaspora tends to introduce and consume the products from their country of origin. I think this can typically relate to South Korea because I see many K-towns around the world that often imports traditional foods or favors, spices, etc., etc. And the 10% of the El Salvador's total export is amount up to a diaspora purchase of traditional products, which was super interesting. I'm not sure the portion in South Korea, but I'm pretty sure it has a quite significant number for the influence of diasporas abroad. So we can definitely know that import and export from Korea can be influenced by the number of diaspora. And as you remember the numbers, 7.3 million, that's not a small number at all. So I think South Korea has a competitiveness or advantage in that case. Considering the total population, roughly around 50 million, that's a pretty big number. As we get to see, we can share the economic impact that we're having or the correlationship between the import and export partners and comparing it to the diaspora populations abroad. So on the center, we can see we have the highest number of diasporas in the United States, second highest in China, and third highest in Japan, and fourth in Canada, Uzbekistan, Russia, and so on. If we see the import partners, may or may not be the correlation with the Chinese diasporas, but I do believe that it has a certain amount of influence, especially on the import. So China is standing strong as a first place, although who doesn't really import from China, right? So it has a massive number, but I'm sure there is a strong portion, especially considering a lot of food cultures in South Korea. We are engaging with a lot of Chinese spices, especially mara. So I think that also has a strong influence on our import partners. U.S. also a strong import partner. Japan and Australia is way below as a diaspora. No, it's not really way below. It's ranked at seventh. So we can also see the correlation is happening in South Korea as well. And when we see the export partner, China, again, standing strong, US, and then we get to see the Vietnam as our another export partner, and Japan. So yes, I think diaspora and the economic impact in South Korea is also extending. And now what we have to see is the investment part. Interesting thing is that according to the World Bank, diaspora originating in developing countries have a saving that amounted to almost 400 billion. And extensively, they say that diasporas from the developing countries has a higher tendency to have a saving account. So they do have that saving culture, which means it's a pretty high budget potentials by attracting diasporas to fund their originate countries. For instance, Senegal, as I mentioned about Africa, investment fund for Senegal abroad, like Senegalese abroad, financed 804 projects worth 40 million US dollar. And when I was in Senegal, I literally experienced it into skins. Most of the major accelerators or unicorns or nearly unicorn startups in Senegal were mostly founded by diaspora populations, most of them coming from France or Canada. Bringing these experience in those countries and skill set to a developing country has a strong impact. And also the angel networks in Africa or West Africa were often funded by these kind of Senegalese abroad or Western Africans abroad funds or angel investors. Interesting thing that I found out was that when India was trying to launch their first nuclear programs, when they were going through a sanction, they were able to raise 11 billion US dollar worth of fund through two types of bonds that is targeted for Indian diasporas abroad. So yes, you can even develop a nuclear program with a diaspora funded bonds. So that's another impact that I recognize. Another case was Israel. For infrastructure development project in Israel, they have convinced the diaspora communities around the world and has raised 25 billion US dollar. So again, we can recognize how massive their influence can be to our ecosystem. And I see there could be a hope in South Korea about raising extra funds from the diaspora population since we have like 7.3 million. So what are the cases? What I see as a positive impact that was driven by Korean diasporas was that UKF, which was often discussed in LinkedIn, and I was also very inspired from 82 Startup, and UKF, their activities, how they're supporting Korean founders coming into Korea. And I think we're not far away from seeing the actual massive growth happening from the United Korean founders to impacting Korean founders in US. As you can see, their mission is to empower Korean entrepreneurs through a supportive network that founder innovation, collaboration, and growth to create integrated community that supports Korean entrepreneurs. So basically, if you get to see the members, the founding members of United Korean Founders, most of them are coming from the diaspora backgrounds. I think it could be a very positive start to bring this win to Korea. If we see other diaspora case founders who successfully relocated to South Korea or building a lot of business and jobs, we have Lotte, which is Japanese diaspora, a Korean diaspora from Japan, Coupang, Korean American founded. If we look back, we do have a lot of amount of jobs or values that has been created through these two businesses. So we should really keep an eye on the diaspora and the economic impacts. But, however, my closing slide will be what are the practical obstacles and the directions that we should be going for. There are priorities before globalizing our ecosystem. I do have, like the Garrison itself, our goal is to globalize South Korean startup ecosystem. And along the way, many people often outlooks the importance of diasporas. And one of the cases that I get to experience is that, diasporas are somewhere in between middle of Korean and foreigners. So they become foreigners in their home country. Sometimes they become foreigners at their ethnic root country. So how are we treating them? How are we dealing with it? I mean, if we make it into a certain level of success, all of a sudden this foreigner becomes a Korean and we're so proud of it. And then when they're neutral, mediocre achieving, we just consider them as a kyopo. And then when they're overachieving or when we are like seeing them having a huge success against our country, then we are all of a sudden calling them as komori 외국인. And I think this is one of those perspectives that we have to fix over time to accept these potentials of diasporas around the world to come back to Korea and bring the growth. And today I really want to save time for much more of a panel chat with our guest speaker because he has much more expertise in this scope. So please welcome Tiger Cho from Cambridge.
Thank you for having me, Riso. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so please introduce us yourself with relation to our topic today. Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, my name is Tiger Cho. I am kind of a 2.5 generation Korean American.
Mm-hmm.
My parents left Korea when they were 6-7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and raised abroad, and I moved to Korea in September of 2024. So I've been here for just around 9 months now, and I am the founder of K-Bridge, which is a organization dedicated to connecting Korean diaspora profiles, both in Seoul, but also abroad, digitally and through in-person events.
Okay, so what drove you to this stage of founding Cambridge?
I think there were a number of things that I had been thinking about. I always had an interest in living in Korea.
Okay.
And when I was in undergrad at Stanford, I had done 2 internships in Tokyo, Japan.
Okay.
Those were the first times that I had left the United States, and they were very impactful experiences for me. But I had always wished that because of my own Korean heritage, I had spent some time in Seoul.
Okay.
Last year, this is like early 2024, I had decided, I'm 27, I was 27 at the time. I, from a financial perspective, was in a very good situation. And I felt like I had a window where I could take some risks with my career and try something new. And I decided, I would leave my kind of corporate 9-to-5 job, move to Korea for a couple of months, and just see what it was like to live here in Korea. I'd never lived here before. But I did know coming here that the Korean diaspora was very vast, both in terms of countries that it represents, and as you had outlined, just the population size is quite large. And so when I came here and I saw so many interesting Korean diaspora profiles, people from Uzbekistan, people from Brazil, from Germany, from Australia, I thought, is there some sort of like an ecosystem or community that is providing connectivity, sharing stories, providing collaboration opportunities to these individuals? And when I had kind of realized that there wasn't much, I decided why not try and start something like this myself.
So actually, is this like a registered business activity, or is it much more like a personal gig or MPO? What's the aim over here?
Yes. So the answer is that I'm still trying to figure out like the ideal business model. Ultimately, I hope that I can make this kind of my life's work to some extent, right?
Okay.
I've taken a big risk in doing that. When I was back in the States during the holiday season, this was like December, January timeframe, I did incorporate K-Bridge as an LLC in Chicago.
Oh.
So it is a for-profit entity from a very like legal structural perspective. But longer term, I think there are both for-profit like motives that will naturally align with Cambridge and its mission, but then also from a personal fulfillment standpoint, things that I want to offer the community, provide value to them that would, I guess, land more in line with like a foundation or an NGO type of organization.
Okay.
So it's somewhere in the middle ground where I do want to make money and keep this financially self-sustaining, but I also think that there's a lot of good that could come about from building out Cambridge over time.
Awesome. So speaking about value, since you're running the community of diasporas, what are the common motive of this diaspora is coming back to Korea, and what are the values that they're seeking for to be provided for them. So,
You know, we were talking a little bit before we even started the show about how every Korean diaspora's kind of unique story or situation is quite different, right? You have some people who are leaving, they were born in Korea, they left at an early age, and maybe they come back later in life because of family reasons or because of visa issues, right? So some people are kind of back in Korea and they don't feel like they fully fit into Korean society because they have been so exposed to these other cultures. There are other people like myself who are second, third generation Korean American or Korean Canadian, etc. And I think their curiosity is through their grandparents, through their siblings, maybe through the communities that they grew up in. They always had like some pride of their own Korean heritage and their background. And there is kind of a yearning to stay connected to your roots. And for me, that's part of what it was. So I think each person's kind of like motive is quite different. And it's funny because I interview Korean heritage individuals for my podcast as well. And some people who have had very similar backgrounds, they were born and raised as Korean Americans in the States, and then at age 20 to 25, they have very different life trajectories. Some people have an affinity towards Korean culture and really want to come to Korea and live here for a period of time, and other people have kind of felt like they got their fill of Korean culture through their Korean American experiences, and they don't really want anything to do with that anymore, right? So people's experiences are so individualistic, I think. But for many of the people that I do see coming back to Korea that are like myself, second or third generation, they do want to stay connected to their roots, and they see some sort of opportunity, whether that's building a business, like a startup, or there are a number of people that I've come across that are working on like cultural projects that they're very passionate about.
Interesting.
So it really runs the gamut in terms of reasons why people decide to come back.
What's the rough catch like of portion when it comes to a portion of these people you interview or meet? Like, do these diasporas come to Korea to get a job or because of job or to build business? Like, what's the rough portion that you get to see?
I would say most of those that are second, third generation, like myself, are not coming to get a job. They're either coming to start a startup and hopefully like return back to the States, or they're coming on some sort of like a sabbatical period where they've been working in corporate for, who knows, maybe 5 to 10 years, and they've decided, I want to reevaluate the trajectory of my life. Korea is like a great place to do that, and maybe they have family here or they have some friends here, and so they figure that maybe pulling themselves outside of just like American life will give them like a better perspective. So I think when it comes to diaspora that are second, third, fourth generation, that's more so the mindset that I see. There are a few people who come to do like maybe a graduate degree or to do some sort of like an internship program. But outside of that second, third, fourth generation category, those that were born in Korea, spent extended periods of time abroad, and then decide to come back, oftentimes I see them coming in and out, but one of the main reasons is family, or they are not just sure like where else to be. And Korea, from a quality of life standpoint, is quite a good place to be if you're in this kind of midpoint of you're not sure what to do. In terms of cost of living, quality of life, safety, convenience, there's a lot that Korea has to offer. So I see people, I've been hosting these Cambridge events, and every time I host an event, I see like a turnover in the types of people that show up. And it's because like Seoul as a city is very dynamic, and that you have people coming to Korea for maybe a few months and then going abroad and then coming back. So it's quite interesting for me.
So sorry to ask about the portion once again. What the portion of these people who are willing to stay a bit longer or stay permanently versus those people who wants to like, I got enough of it and I want to leave?
It's funny because originally when I started Cambridge, I had thought that it would mostly be for, I would say, strictly Korean diaspora types of profiles like myself, like second, third, fourth generation Korean diaspora that are here in Seoul. Right? There are a number of those individuals. But over time, especially when you talk about like the Cambridge membership body, for example, a number of those are Korean citizens that speak English fluently, have spent extended periods of time, maybe in the States or in the UK, somewhere in Europe. And then they have come back for some reason, right? So it's difficult for me to assess which, between those two types of profiles. But in terms of like true second, third, fourth generation Korean diaspora that are like in their 20s and 30s like myself, that are coming here with the intent of staying long term, I would say it's quite small, to be honest.
Okay.
Like maybe 20 to 25% of the people that I have come across have that intent. In terms of like what it actually looks like in practice, maybe they end up staying for a lot longer than they originally anticipated. For example, one of the first people that I had met here was a YouTube content creator. He was always planning on leaving, but he was here because of COVID and because of his family situation. His parents are based here. And so he decided, because COVID was hectic, I'll come back to Korea and maybe I'll just stay for like a year and I'll go back to the States and get a high paying job in creative design. He was doing a lot of digital design work, but he decided kind of over time, maybe I'll just stay another year, maybe I'll just stay another year, right? So there was no like intent on making Korea his home base, but because of kind of serendipitous circumstances, he decided, quality of life is pretty good. I'm not exactly sure if I really want to go back to the States. I might as well just stick around. And I do find that a lot of the types of profiles that I come across have that similar shape. Is they're not working for, a Korean company. They're doing something more independent, freelance type of work. But they're more Korean diaspora profile as well.
I mean, even for me, although I'm Korean citizen, I went back and forth from Canada to Korea to US to Korea to New Zealand to Korea. And as a Korean citizen who speaks perfect Korean, it's still difficult to blend in. And also to like really understand why this is happening in between like Korean society, especially on the social moments. And I also experienced a lot of obstacles or challenges when I'm trying to do business as a Korean but much more foreign-minded personnel. And what are the common obstacles, like real-life obstacles or challenges or cases that you have heard while you were interviewing, or what you have seen from the Korean diasporas, or what you have experienced?
Yeah. I mean, I think the toughest hurdle is obviously the language piece, right? Because through the language you have some sort of an understanding, right? And for me, especially as second, third generation Korean American who doesn't speak much Korean at all, that has been a huge barrier, right? From a day-to-day living standpoint, in terms of surviving and getting by, it's completely fine. But in terms of engaging in any real business, aside from maybe doing business with like foreigners, or other Korean diaspora, which there is no, aside from Cambridge, real like Korean diaspora community per se. So it's not easy to find those people. Language is a huge hurdle. But even beyond that, if the language piece was solved, there are so many layers of like subtle cultural communication differences between at least like my American background and like Korean background, that I feel like oftentimes I'm missing certain social cues and not communicating myself in the way that I'd want to communicate myself effectively. That is another pretty big barrier as well.
How about like, let's say your language was solved, like when it comes to a business, business culture, or finding an opportunity, making a sales type of opportunities. What are the real life challenges over there? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like some of these things I'm still learning on a day-to-day basis, right? I've been here for 9 months. I think most of the community that I built around me has been Korean diaspora types of profiles that are English speaking, because my Korean language level is not good enough to have conversation with, regular Koreans. But like a few specific examples is, even the kind of knowing your place within a hierarchy, right? Like podcast conversation. I was a big podcaster when I was in the States, and I could go to an investor or an entrepreneur who is well regarded, and I could say, hey, can we do a podcast recording? And aside from the fact that maybe they didn't have time or they had other responsibilities, if they were willing to have a conversation, we could have a conversation almost on equal terms where I could ask them any question, right? Mm-hmm. And I could feel comfortable having the conversation. Mm-hmm. Whereas in Korean society, that's not really a thing, right? Mm-hmm. There is some sort of a deference that you have to show to your seniors, mm-hmm. right? And I think me growing up in the States, even though I know that this hierarchy exists here in Korea, it's very difficult for me to kind of mold myself in that way or adapt in that way, mm-hmm. right? Another very practical example that came up recently was even with Cambridge and the value proposition that it could offer to Korean governments, to other corporations, mm-hmm. to different academic universities that could support it. People here were telling me that the way that you need to approach these individuals is to almost package Cambridge in a way to say, here is the value proposition that Cambridge could provide you in your institution, and really cater it towards them and what they're looking for. Oh, yeah. Right? And kind of mold the Cambridge pitch, so to say, to fulfill their needs and their desires, right? I guess this also would apply in the States as well, but I think it's to a much different degree, where in the States, if I'm doing something exciting and cool and ambitious and I'm starting to make noise on social media, oftentimes interested investors or partners or businessmen will just reach out and say, hey, I think what you're doing is great. How can we collaborate, right? Whereas in Korea, I think that there's maybe some subtle signs of that's not really how business is done. Me, as the person who started this project, needs to go out and approach these individuals mm-hmm. that have capital, that have resources, and kind of cater to what they're looking for, right? That was a piece of feedback that somebody gave me recently, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And so these kind of things are things I'm learning.
Yeah, I mean, the aspects, the channels, everything is just totally different, right? So in the early days, or I think even these days, I see a lot of foreign students or Korean Americans or just typical foreigners who would reach out to me via LinkedIn and say hey, I studied in marketing and I want to get a job in South Korea, and I've been asking them do you know how marketing works? You were never been in Korea, and sometimes they show us portfolios, and most of their strong suits are coming from Facebook or Google, Google ads. But in South Korea we have totally different channels, and I think if for typical foreigners it's already difficult, and as Korean diaspora it will be exactly the same, because even if they want to do B2C promotion, they have to go to Kakao and Naver instead of going to Google and WhatsApp. So I mean, channel mindset, everything is just very difficult. Same with me, for this podcast that I'm running, I think I'm doing the English version for 3 weeks in a row right now, because if I try to reach out to Korean speakers that I want to reach out to, they'll be I'm not sure if I can be, if I'm the eligible person to speak or represent this ecosystem. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that really we get to hit. But what's the other side? We were talking about the obstacles then, but what are the other potentials that you get to see from these diasporas who are interested in Korea, or who are already doing interesting projects or setting up new business in Korea? What are the potentials that you get to see from these interviewees that you have met during Cambridge?
Man, I think the opportunities are quite limitless, you know, and I think individuals maybe like yourself are quintessential examples of what could be possible, where I come across a number of Korean people that are asking me about Cambridge and its purpose, and maybe they have very deep networks, Korean networks, but they are trying to do something to engage foreigners, and their ability to communicate with foreigners is not nearly as good. And so they've come to me and said, do you have a network of Americans or Canadians that are doing Korean, the same types of business? Exactly, right? But people like you, who are these intermediaries, where you understand Korean culture, you understand the foreign culture, you can be a bridge to these let's say foreign communities and the Korean communities, right?
Well, to be honest, I think I'm still learning, right? I'm still on that baby step of really understanding Korean culture, but Like I think even in that case, like language is that last missing piece of opening up these hurdles, right?
Yes.
I see. I think it also is connected to that culture. Like South Korea is a shy culture, but still we are welcoming people, but we don't seem to be welcoming that brightly. So like I think many foreign populations or diasporas, when they come into Korea, they feel really difficult to reach out to people and say like to get the help or get supported. What's the other channels that you recommend like these diasporas to get some support, or any tips that you often give to diasporas when they're first coming into Korea to run a business or to get a job? What are the tips that you get to give?
You know, when it comes to getting a job, I probably am not the best example, right? Because I'm doing something independent and intentionally so. I think it would be very, very difficult for me to try and get a job that I was passionate about, I felt like I was getting fairly compensated at, and doing that here in Korea, right? I think that is one of the biggest hurdle that Korea faces in trying to attract Korean diaspora back, is what job opportunities really exist for them, right? I do think that one of the great things is that in a world where freelance work and creative jobs that don't require you to be in the office exist. I mean, a lot of the Korean diaspora that are here are freelance workers or they're startup founders. They're doing something independent, right? There are not so many truly Korean diaspora profiles that were like born and raised abroad that I find working for more Korean traditional companies, because that cultural bridge is pretty steep to bridge. But I do find a lot of Korean diaspora that are doing independent work, right? They're doing like English tutoring, or they're running their own camps or academies or things like this, right? So I think those types of jobs exist. Part of the reason why I decided to start Cambridge was because I didn't feel like there was enough social infrastructure for Korean diaspora, focused on Korean diaspora people, right? The community that you've built at the Garrison is, I think, like an amazing starting point, right, for Korean diaspora. And so if something like Cambridge didn't exist, I would tell them, you know, go check out the Garrison, and I still do, right? But if they are looking for something more catered to Korean diaspora, there are, let's say if you're a Korean American cacao chats and organizations, things like this. Same with because of Cambridge, I've gotten more exposed to Korean diaspora leaders that are building communities specific to Korea and their home country. So there's a Korean Australian young professionals organization, and they host events on a regular basis. There's a Korean German community of around, I think it's like 60 to 70 Korean German kyopos, and they meet like every other month or something like that, right? So there are these like pockets of communities that exist. The difficult part is usually it takes a little bit of time to discover them or learn about them, because unless you have existing connections to some of those community members, it just takes a while. And that's part of the reason why I started Cambridge. Is if I see a French-Korean guy come into the ecosystem, in the Cambridge ecosystem, I immediately connect him to my friend Jay, who is like kind of a community leader in the Korean French community, right? Or if I see a Korean German guy, I connect them to my friend Jusuk, who is like he's been building kind of a Korean German community here in Seoul.
Interesting.
Right. So my hope is that Cambridge can be welcoming of all these Korean diaspora communities, and it will provide that like starting point for some of these Korean diaspora that come here.
So getting to know people first, check the water, and then like span out your plan, but focus on your individual projects and see where it goes, right?
Yes.
So, but like, how long did it took you to like float it up? Because it takes time, right? Like you landed in Korea, it took you about now a year and a half to come to this stage. Like, what were your approaches, and what's the recommended time frame for those interested people who want to come to Korea as a diasporas?
So I've been here for only 9 months.
Okay.
You know? So it's been less than half, or less than a year, full year. My mindset was go to some startup events, English first events, and try and just test the waters for what other Korean diaspora profiles are here and what kind of communities exist. I think the lucky thing for me was as soon as I thought of this idea of building K-Bridge, I had met one or two people who were community builders in the startup ecosystem, and they had deep networks. So when they learned that I was doing this, they started connecting me with their friends, saying, hey, this person is starting this community. You should talk to him because your profile fits what he's looking for, right? And from there, it was more so a ripple effect, where maybe the first 2 to 3 months, it was me searching out for people. And I would say now I'm much more in the state of, because I'm hosting events, because I'm posting on social media, I am getting more inbound than I have like time in the schedule for coffee chats, which is a great problem to have. But from time management perspective, it becomes tricky, right? So it took me like 3 or 4 months to get there, but I was really hustling, and I would say, like, unashamed in the project that I was building because I was so passionate about it. And I do think the social media element of things can really change the game if you're working on a project that other people are interested in, because it sends kind of like bat signals out to the world of like, hey, if you're Korean diaspora heritage, I'm looking for you. I want to hear your story and see what other communities exist. And from there it kind of cascaded.
Okay. What's the most usual channels that you get exposure to, or you find interesting informations or meaningful connections? Is it like LinkedIn, Facebook? Because there's a massive expat community in Facebook. There are a lot of channels on Instagram, but it's slightly fragmented. Like for diasporas, would there be any particular channels that you recommend?
Probably 60 to 70% is coming through LinkedIn.
Okay.
A lot of people that are finding out about K-Bridge through LinkedIn. I would say around 20% is through either newsletter or the Kakao group chat that I'm running. Is somebody will reach out and say like, hey, I think this person would enjoy being part of this group chat. Or I send a newsletter on a monthly basis, and then new people will subscribe to the newsletter, and then we'll hear about some of the events that I'm hosting, right? And then I'd say probably like maybe 10 to 15% through some of the YouTube interviews that I'm doing as well, because I am posting the shorts both on YouTube, but then also on LinkedIn as well. Friends of the people that I'm interviewing will see like, this is some K-Bridge project. I'm also Korean diaspora. I wonder what this person is doing. And then they'll reach out and find my email or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, do you feel more Korean as you live longer in Korea? Like, does that kind of thing happen? Like, I'm just genuine curiosity. Yeah.
I feel like I certainly have a better understanding of Korean culture than I did 9 months ago.
Okay.
Right? But in terms of how Korean I feel, well, I think the main thing is that it is a bit of a paradox, because I did go back to the States for about a month during the holiday season, right? And when I'm here in Korea, I can't help but notice the differences that exist. And I just constantly feel American, right? And I'm more, maybe, I don't know if proud is the right word, but I just like wear that badge of like, yes, I'm an American, I'm not part of Korean culture, right? Because that kind of gives me a pass too. But when people see me walking or they see me talking and they see just like my mannerisms, they kind of dismiss me or give me a pass because I'm not Korean, right? When I'm back home in the States, I do feel a little bit more Korean.
Okay.
Right? Maybe it's just like a bit more reserved or introverted, or there are certain maybe like the bluntness of American culture. It's I can see more of it bothers me in some ways that maybe it wouldn't have had I not come to Korea.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So it is quite a weird dynamic, but I do think that if I had more Korean friends and I was speaking Korean, the amount of me feeling like I've been Koreanized would have been much stronger. I have been building an English first Korean diaspora type of ecosystem. So I've really been spending time with people who are culturally German, culturally from Australia, from New Zealand, from Brazil.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like I'm being like sucked into this like Korean bubble, so to say. Yeah, so to speak.
I mean, one of the reasons that I asked, like, do you feel more Korean, is that if I see Korean, aesthetically Korean foreigner founders, like diaspora founders. At the end of the day, if I get to see them working, in their blood, they're Korean. They work like Korean. They work their ass off, right? So, like, what I see is that I think that's one of the huge strengths of having that trait of being Korean and in the same time getting exposed to the overseas culture in the very long term or from the birth. That kind of gives a really good mixture of becoming a, I don't know, I can't say successful, but like maybe successful,
Yes.
but highly potentialed entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So do you see that competitiveness in your experience as well? Like many Korean diaspora founders has like, I don't know, a bit more efficient or working much more harder than the other employees or other entrepreneurs. Do you see that often as well?
I think you see it most prominent in the kids of first generation Korean diaspora,
Okay.
right? Because if you're a Korean person and then you leave Korea in your 20s or your 30s, and then you have kids, you really pass down like that work ethic.
Yeah.
And I see that theme coming up time and time again, right? For me as an individual, speaking from my own experience, I think it could go either way. I am a very hard worker, but I also think that there's something kind of inherent about my personality.
Okay.
It's not necessarily attributed so much to my Korean background,
Okay.
even though my parents did instill some values of like hard work is important, right?
Yeah.
You have to work harder than the next guy because life in some respects is a competitive dynamic.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that there is this thing of Korean work ethic, and then coming here, some of the college students that I come across that have international backgrounds but are Korean citizens. I mean, some of the hardest working people that I have seen.
Yeah.
I think that's a huge asset for the country, and I just wish that there was more opportunities provided to some of these young, ambitious individuals because it's remarkable compared to some of like the American college students that I see who are not nearly on the same level.
So coming to that point, to bring that potential into a realization, what are the things or ideas that you had in mind to recommend to South Korean ecosystem that maybe we might need these kind of infrastructures, or maybe these kind of system will be helpful to attract such a well mixture of diasporas, the diversity to come into Korea and bring more innovations or bring this potential into the next level? Like, were there any ideas that you had in mind?
Yeah. I started hosting events, in-person events, just on a monthly basis because it became very obvious to me that doing something on a digital community dynamic is valuable, but people's appreciation and their feel for a real community being built, it changes once you do in-person events.
True.
And so I've been hosting events on a monthly basis, and one of the things that has come up time and time again is maybe there are more impactful, bigger ways to do in-person community longer term. And one of those things that I'm very excited about is to hopefully do a conference where I bring back more Korean diaspora. And maybe this would be like a week-long type of conference. But to do something where maybe if you're Korean, Vietnamese, Korean, Australian, you've never even been to Korea before, providing them exposure to Korea and also showing them that, hey, there is a community here if you want to try and just live here for 2 to 3 months, maybe try your hand at a startup, right? There are so many convenient things about living in Korea that I think it has a lot to offer. So that's like one example. There is a much longer term play that I think could be very, very interesting, where even from a co-living situation, if there is a physical home base for K-Bridge and there is like a K-Bridge house, right? And in this K-Bridge house, there are events that are being hosted by, let's say, people of Korean Brazilian background, people of Korean German background. They're sharing their culture, and it's in this kind of ecosystem where the differences are celebrated. I think that could be really exciting as well. And who knows, what the future could hold if a centralized K-Bridge house could exist in Seoul. Maybe you could have satellite K-Bridge houses in Berlin, in Rio, in LA, where there are large Korean diaspora communities already, and these could be helpful for Koreans that are trying to go abroad to also build their own networks and feel at home as well. So I think that there's a lot of directions that Cambridge can go in terms of like the green space of possibilities, and that's part of what the reason why I am still working so hard and I am investing the time and energy into this project is because I think there's so much on the other side that is still to be explored.
So expansion of a comfort zone, basically.
Yeah.
I see. So like, although you were this diasporas, like in some part of yourselves or some part of ourselves and many other diasporas, although they are like recognizing they are a bit of Koreans, they still feel difficult when they come to Korea.
For sure. For sure.
So like language is one thing, culture is another thing.
Yes.
Would there be anything other like that needs to be improved that you felt like I don't know, like visa issues or financial issues or like support programs? For instance, what I see is that it's a program for foreigners, but sometimes diasporas don't really count.
Yes.
Or like, what are the other things that needs to be a bit more solved or improved to expand that comfort zone for more diasporas to come in?
Yeah, I think some of the things that you touched on are more subtle things, but very important as well. I think it's very interesting that, especially from maybe like a marketing or outward facing viewpoint, is Korea has been increasingly becoming more foreigner friendly, right?
Okay.
But oftentimes I think from Korean diaspora perspective, what that means is like foreigners, right? People that do not look Asian,
Yeah.
right? And so it always puts Korean diaspora types of profiles in an awkward situation.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I am a foreigner, but I'm not the same type of foreigner as a foreigner who's
Yeah.
never touched the culture before,
Yeah.
right? Or doesn't have some cultural background.
True.
So having something dedicated towards them, I think would be quite nice. There have been programs that have existed in the past that try and bring Korean diaspora back to Korea and give them some cultural experiences, but I feel like oftentimes those are maybe a week long or a month long, and they are not like true investments in the Korean diaspora, right? I hope that Korean government would view Korean diaspora backgrounds as an asset to be invested in, because from a cross-border dynamic, I think there's a lot that exists.
Yeah.
I have spoken to people building companies in K-beauty, K-drama, K-pop industry who are all doing cross-border stuff. They're trying to take stuff in Korea and bring it to the U.S.
Yeah.
They're trying to do stuff in Korea, bring it to Australia or Europe, right? And it is these Korean diaspora profiles that I think can uniquely be that facilitator.
True.
And so, I hosted an event the other day, and one of the individuals that I had spotlighted, she was born in Korea. She moved to Luxembourg when she was like 10 years old. She spent 10 years there, and K-pop, webtoons, a lot of the Korean cultural influences were a big part of her life. Now she came back, she's working in Korea for Makestar, which is a K-pop company, and she is owning the European market, and her background is like very uniquely positioned for her to understand and run that business. I think there's a lot more opportunities like that for Korean diaspora. If the government was kind of signaling to Korean diaspora like, hey, there's a home for you here.
True. I think we really have to open up our eyes and like really, lower our barriers a bit than what we did before. I think what I personally believe is that in many of Koreans, they do have this hierarchy of Korean diasporas depending on which country they're coming from. And I think that is even more cruel than the racism, personally, because like which country they were, or first or second or third generation diaspora, or is kind of becoming the definition of this person's potential or the value of it. And I think that's kind of limiting a lot of other potentials to come to Korea as well. And like having such an organization like Cambridge, I was pretty much inspired and pretty much amazed from like all these podcasts or activities that you guys are running. Since you are like currently you're running it by yourself and a bit of a volunteer staffs. Okay.
That's right.
What's your long-term goal to really expand and bring this potential to Korea?
Yeah. I think what I've committed to so far is over the next 12 months to continue to live in Seoul, to continue to interview interesting Korean heritage types of profiles. I had mentioned to you before we kind of jumped onto the recording that starting end of June, end of this month, I'll be in the States for about 4 weeks. I'll be in San Francisco, Chicago, and New York. And while I'm in San Francisco and New York, my plan is to host some K-Bridge gatherings there as well, right? I hope in the near future that I could visit Berlin, visit maybe Sydney, where there are other large Korean diaspora populations, and to communicate to them that, hey, this kind of platform exists, this community exists. So when you're in Korea, you should come to some of the events. You should join the group chat and share about your background and share about the people that you're trying to connect with. And that my hope is that over the next 6 to 12 months, there will be enough like natural buzz and interest in this community that I can really make this financially self-sustaining and do this longer term. There are some like direct strategic business opportunities, which is kind of like institutionalizing a membership like directory, right? There's a Kakao group chat right now, and people have been sharing intros based on who they are and what they're interested in. But people have asked for, hey, can you make a private group chat for all the K-beauty people that are in the K-beauty industry? Something like that for people that are doing K-pop related stuff, right? And what I've told them is like, not yet, right? I want to hit a critical mass, and then maybe at some point in the future, I can do that. And I think that from a monetization perspective, in terms of value add, if people are already asking for that, that's an area where I can really build this into a bigger business as well.
What's the critical mass that you're targeting for right now?
Right now I think across most kind of like social media platforms, I would say around 300 to 400 like active community members that are either here in Seoul or abroad. I'd like to get that closer to around 2,000. Okay. And then when I feel like, because if I were to start, let's say like a K-beauty sub-channel right now, maybe I could have like 10 to 15 high-quality individuals, but the value proposition really changes if I could have 40 to 50 individuals in that ecosystem. So I think if I could get to around 2,000, I'd feel comfortable making that transition.
Interesting business model. I want to say, I mean, like I think. We roughly touched on most of the important pillars, and again, like we have a lot more discussion to have about actually like how important diasporas are, like economic impacts, trades, investments, and what are the improvements that we have to make. But coming to the wrapping up of this today's podcast, what are the messages that you want to bring, or what are the values that you really want to find from maybe your trip in San Francisco, New York? Like, it's not about quantity, it's actually about quality. What kind of quality people you want to gather up in San Francisco, New York, or even Berlin or Sydney? Yes. And what's your last closing remarks would be? That's my question. Yeah,
I think that all I would say is, especially to people within the K-Bridge community, is ultimately like the success of the community is dependent on the community members and kind of what they're motivated to bring to the table as well, right? Me as an individual, I can't do a lot of this alone. I've had mentors that have given me advice on how to navigate certain situations. When I needed a venue, for example, I've had people in the community kind of help step up and say, hey, you should use this venue because I know the person and they'd be happy to host you. Or even with the own K-Bridge podcast that I've been running is my French-Korean friend had said, hey, I run this tourism business. If you want to record out of my studio, you're more than welcome to do that. Awesome. Right? So I think my kind of encouragement to Korean diaspora people or people within the K-Bridge community is that if you feel like there are inadequacies within either the K-Bridge ecosystem or just like the social infrastructure within Seoul in general, be the first person to kind of like step up and try something, initiate it, and then other people will follow. I think it's not so helpful when people have complaints or frustrations, but nobody's actually willing to try and do anything, right? And I think we had talked about before is for maybe the both of us, is the thing that is cool and inspiring is to see that there are people that are trying to build their own communities. There are people that are trying to create change, right? And if it fails, then it fails. But the first step is at least to try, because you don't know. And so I think that is also my encouragement to people within the Cambridge community as well, is the value that I can provide as an individual is quite limited, but the value that I could provide if I have many people within this Cambridge ecosystem that are willing to try and support each other on the journey to making change, that's a much more promising, I think, value proposition. So that's what I would leave some of the people that are listening that are part of the Cambridge community or even just interested in Korean diaspora in general.
I think universal value of entrepreneurs is that at least we tried. That I mean, there are problems that's waiting to be fixed all around the world, and even the smallest problem that can be solved by the communities. But many people often walks by and just thinking like maybe somebody else will do it, and many will try to do it and fail. But at least we have to value that at least we tried. So yeah, I mean, I really want to celebrate your hard work coming to Cambridge, and then I really hope to see more progress in San Francisco and New York City. Thank you so much for having me as a host and joining us as a podcast. And thank you so much, everyone. This was Tiger Cho from Cambridge, and we'll see you next week with much more contents. Thank you.
Thank you, Riso.